for joining me on the Farming Podcast brought to you by Private Property. Today we have an interesting entrepreneur, and she is in the beekeeping space of farming, or beekeeping side within the agricultural sector. And her name is Mokgadi Mabela, founder and CEO of Native Nosi. I really encourage you to ask any questions if you have. It's quite a niche industry, so I know a lot of you will be listening attentively, curious about how you become a bee farmer or how you process honey, for example, and what really goes into the process of farming and producing honey. Native Nosi is a brand that is quite known now. I know it. I've seen it. I follow their pages on social media, and if it's your first time hearing about them, please do support them. And but yeah, without wasting any further of your time, let's get into today's conversation with Mokgadi. I encourage you to please ask any questions that you might have, because I'm sure this is going to be quite a conversation full of knowledge and information, which we can all take away when we go home or after this live. So Mokgadi, thank you so much for joining us. And how are you doing?
I'm okay, Mbali, and yourself. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about Native Nosi. You know, I'm sure you get a lot of these questions, like, black girl going into bees, how did that happen? What were you doing before? And bees are harmful, you know, they sting. So it's an industry that not a lot of us come across, or especially you're one such professional or entrepreneur that is in an industry that we really don't think about, especially in agriculture, you know. So just tell us, please, about Native Nosi, when you started and how you came to incorporate Native Nosi.
So Native Nosi is a beekeeping company. We specialize in the production of pure South African raw honey, and we also deal with pollination services. We provide these services to crop farmers who need active pollination from honeybees on their farms, so that they can be able to yield a better quality crop and a greater number in terms of the crops that they will harvest per season. And those are our two specialities as Native Nosi. We have been registered since 2015 and actively operating since 2016. And it's our 5th year now in operation. How we got into it, or how rather I got into it, I'm the founder of Native Nosi, and my father is a beekeeper. That's how I actually got into it. But he was doing it at a subsistence level. So he was doing beekeeping at a scale where he wanted to actually provide the basics for his family. And that's the scale at which he was doing it. And I went to tertiary. I had a normal life. I went to tertiary in Pretoria, at the University of Pretoria, and I studied international relations. And then I went into the corporate space and started working there. And while I was there, that's when the seed for Native Nosi started, because I realized that people were using honey for the first time in my life. I don't know why, maybe because people who actually afford honey are people who are working. Because previously, before that, obviously I was in tertiary. You're not trying to buy honey in tertiary because you're not that bougie. All the money you have is for groceries and drinking and partying. So honey is not part of your basic acquisitions when you're in tertiary. So when I was in the working space, I realized that actually these people are not using the honey that I know to be honey, or at least the honey that I know my father was farming while I grew up. And then I asked them, you know, like, is this what you guys refer to as honey? And they're like, yes. I'm like, but I'm not sure what the deal with this honey is, but I know it's not honey. And I know that it's at least not the honey that my father is producing. And they're like, what do you mean this is honey? And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll bring you some of what my dad makes. And I did that. And they weren't berserk. They're like, oh my goodness, like, what have we been having this time? And some of the people who grew up in the rural areas, who were exposed to honey hunting, because that's what we do as Africans. We find honey in the wilderness, in trees, in cavities, and the boys that are herding cattle or livestock will normally like burn tires or whatever, and then they'll like get the honey from the trees. And then that's what, the honey that we consume in the rural areas is. And when I brought them some of my father's honey, the ones who knew honey in that way that I just described resonated with, the honey that my father's honey tasted like. And they're like, oh my God, this reminds me of the honey that we grew up eating, and this tastes like the real honey. And they were asking me, what did your father do to the honey? And I'm like, exactly, like this is like pure honey. My father did nothing. He just took what the bees made, and this is what I'm sharing with you. And obviously at the time, I wasn't as educated as I am, like in terms of the industry knowledge. And I didn't know the difference between what was being offered at the commercial shelves or retail markets versus what my father was doing. But it soon became clear that my father is making real honey, and that is what people actually want. And people then started buying the honey from me, and that kind of snowballed because the one person would tell the next, and then people started, wanting more and more. And my father is like, look, I'm not making enough to actually feed your demand anymore. How about I introduce you to some of my network farmers? These would be farmers in the Limpopo region who are doing it at a small scale like him, and they were not really involved in supplying any formal markets. So I spoke to these farmers. I told them, look, there is a market in Gauteng where I'm staying, which actually is looking for the honey that you're producing. Do you mind if I buy it from you and sell it to them? And they're like, coolies, because at the time they were also doing it informally. So they were selling it to whoever wanted to buy, and it wasn't always a good price. But I mean, 10 rands is better than nothing, for example.
Yeah.
So we got into an agreement of, how much I would be getting the honey from them at. And then whenever they had stock, they call me up, and then I go and get the honey. And if they're able to send it up to Gauteng, I do that. And then they soon started running out of honey because the demand on my side was growing and growing. So my father is like, I think the best thing for you to do is to get your own beehives and secure your own supply. So that if you don't have honey from me or from the farmers, then at least you've got some honey of your own that you can also then throw into your current supply and sell. And that's what I did. And that's how Native Nosi was born. Because then you start having to formalize, people who you give honey to are looking for proper invoices, are looking for a proper bank account. And, you have to now start working in some sort of formal structure. And then that's when I registered Native Nosi in 2015. And then 2016, I started actually learning about beekeeping, because the whole time I was selling honey, I was not at the production phase. I was just getting and selling. And then in 2016, that's when I enrolled myself for a beekeeping course. At the time, it was with a guy called Mike Miles. He was at the time the chairperson for the South African Bee Industry Organization. We call it SABIO, which is the industry regulator for beekeeping in South Africa. So Mike Miles was doing these beekeeping courses. He does beginners courses, he does advanced beekeeping courses. And I enrolled myself because I realized that, look, I actually have to have some sort of formal knowledge to inform what I'm doing, because I've just been sort of winging it. Because all the time I didn't actually need to learn the production side of things. Now that I do, I need some sort of knowledge to back me up. And I was already in Gauteng. My father was in Limpopo. So even though I was able to get tips from him, I did not have the time to be with him full time for me to actually learn everything that I needed to learn with beekeeping. And then I learned through the beekeeping beginners course. And that's when I started getting beehives of my own, and then started practicing what I learned from Mike Miles into my own beekeeping practice. And that's how Native Nosi was born, and that's how I actually got into beekeeping.
Wow. So let's get into that, Mokgadi. You mentioned that your farmer and your father and the other farmers that you were outsourcing or procuring from were in Limpopo, and you started your own beekeeping production. Is that based in Gauteng?
So so I do have beehives in Gauteng, but what happened unintentionally was that the places, because now I know we're probably going to come back to that as the interview goes, but I don't have a farm. Native Nosi doesn't have a farm. So the places where my father had a network of farmers, which were either crop farms or just livestock farming, where they had other areas on the farm which they were not using. And that network was from Limpopo, because naturally my father is from Limpopo. I was not a farmer, so I did not have any kind of network of farmers who I could then ask to place my beehives at. And I did get a farmer in Pretoria who allowed me to place my beehives, but the farm was not big enough. And there was not enough vegetation to sustain my bees throughout the year. So what happened was that my father's network helped me to actually have a variety of farmers or a variety of farms which I could place my bees at. So that, because with bees, you have to, if you're doing it at a commercial level or at a small scale level like myself, where you are rotating the bees around to actually have enough honey throughout most of the year, is that you can't have them in one area if you are going to sell the honey for profit like I do. If you are doing it at a small scale or at a hobby level where you just want beehives at your farm, either for recreation or for, pollinating your crops, or just because you love bees, you can have a farm or two and leave them permanently at the same location. I could not do that. So the nearest network of farmers that I had was the farmers in Limpopo. And then what I did in Pretoria is that I got the agro-processing equipment at my house. I dedicated a small space at the back of my house, which was dedicated to processing. So I would then place my beehives at these different farms in Limpopo. And then when it's ready for harvesting, I harvest the honey there, and then I process it in Pretoria. Processing it is not talking manipulating the product. Processing is talking throwing the honey into an extractor where the honey can be extracted from the honeycomb and then be able to be bottled so that we can be able to sell it. And that part of the business takes place in Pretoria. But the actual farming takes place in Limpopo. And in Pretoria, we have what we call observation hives. So those would be the hives that I keep for filming, for when, I have media interviews, when people want to have an idea of what bee farming is about. So the bees there are enough for that kind of demonstration. But for the actual farming, where we actually make the honey that we sell at Native Nosi, that takes place in Limpopo.
Wow, so you're mentioning so many things here, which is starting to pop so many questions in my mind. So what I'm hearing you say is that you can farm bees virtually anywhere, and that you don't have to physically have a farm to farm bees. It's a matter of investing in beehives and maybe putting it in a specific piece of land where those bees can produce. Is that correct?
That is correct. So you don't really, having your own farm always helps because it centralizes operations and it cuts down on your costs. So you don't need to run around to different locations for you to be able to move the bees and, do hive inspections and then bring them to another location to harvest, take them to another to bottle and stuff. So having your own place is really, really critical in terms of containing costs and also centralizing operations. But I didn't have that. So in the absence of me having it, what's the next best thing to do? So that's where we then speak to our network of farmers to host our hives for us. The common denominator with beekeeping is that the place has to be secure. So security is a big, big factor, because otherwise the beehives are very expensive. And if you place your bees in an area where they are vulnerable to vandalism, vulnerable to theft, then you are losing your investment, which is your beehive, and which is a very expensive asset that is critical to your operations. So even if you're not farming on your own farm, the most important thing is for you to get into a partnership or with a host that cares about bees and bee farming as much as you care about it, so that they can make sure that in your absence, then your assets are secure and the bees can actually thrive. Because even though the farmer may not be directly benefiting from the bees from agroeconomic perspective and a socio-economic perspective are essential for our lives as humans. So you want to get into a partnership with somebody who understands the role of bees, so that they can be very invested in ensuring that they're secure. And even when you're not there, the bees still are able to thrive, and knowing that they're in an ideal environment with farmers who actually want them to thrive.
Yeah, so you did mention that you're mostly Native Nosi is mostly from the processing part of it, or side of beekeeping. You're sourcing this honey, you're packaging it, and obviously selling it through to the market. Let's maybe focus on that processing element. Did you find that your customers or your consumers started asking things like, for example, when you buy the Native Nosi honey, for example, does honey expire, and should it be kept, in a fridge or in a cool area, for example?
So if it's raw honey, it should not expire. Raw honey has an indefinite shelf life. And someone was actually making a joke and saying it's actually a commodity, like oil. We should have it on the JSE, because honey does not rot. If it's raw honey, it shouldn't rot. And the only thing is that it will crystallize. Of the glucose content or the chemical makeup of the actual product, of the actual honey, but it doesn't rot. So the clients will ask that, and then they'll say, "Why is my honey crystallizing?" Because they think that when it crystallizes, it's rotten, and we're like, "No, it behaves that way because of the chemical makeup of the product, but that does not compromise the quality or the lifespan of the product." You just simply take it in its jar, put it in a bath of hot water in your sink or in a bowl, and it should go back to its liquid form. Just do not put it in the microwave, because then it will destroy all the enzymes that make honey what it is.
Walk us through to your branding process, Mokgadi, and getting that product packaged. And the reason for this is that sometimes you always focus on the primary production, but there's so many other things, or red tape, or things that we have to tick, the boxes that we have to tick from a processing perspective. So walk us through your journey in branding and packaging Native Nosi. What type of food safety requirements did you have to adhere to when selling honey, and also maybe getting to a point where you educate the consumer on things like that: raw honey versus processed honey. This is the difference, and this is how it would look like, after you've kept it for a couple of months, etc.
Yeah. So I'll just take you through the whole thing. So in terms of farming, so what you do is you have a beehive, and then you wax it. You take beeswax, and then you pour it hot inside of the beehive to actually attract bees to the hive. And then you take the beehive to a place like a farm which has some vegetation in season. The best time to do this is during spring. So between, after July, August, so between August and around this time, November, December, you put your beehive out there in a place where there is vegetation in blossom. And then you are hoping that that wax that you put inside the beehive is going to attract bees, because bees are attracted to wax or anything that smells like any component of the beehive. And then the bees come in and then they populate the beehive. And then they stay there for as long as there's food in the vicinity. So you then give it a year or two, depending on the area. So how quick the honey will take to make will determine how much food there is around for the bees to eat. This is going to be determined by the types of, area. Is it a crop farm? Is it a wild flora farm, so where they depend on indigenous vegetation? Is it an urban area where it's depending on individual gardens that people plant, that is going to be the source of food for the bees? And depending on how much of that is available, then it will determine how quickly the bees are able to actually make honey. Then they will make the honey. They will first establish what we call the brood chamber, which is the bottom part of the beehive. Once that is established, I refer to it as the manufacturing plant. Then you have a top layer which you put on, and that's where the bees put all the extra honey. And this extra honey is not for us, it's actually for the bees. So that during seasons, dry seasons like winter, where there isn't enough food, bees can then actually go back to this honey that they've stored. And then they will go back there to actually sustain themselves through the dry months so that they can be able to then survive winter. And then during spring, then they'll make up more honey again. So we as beekeepers have to time that. If it's closer to winter, we don't harvest. And then after the winter, we harvest. So harvesting, you go to the beehive and then you take the top layer, which I told you about. Then you take that for extraction. How you extract is that you will physically remove this top part and take it to a processing plant where you take out, it has what we call the hive frames. You take these hive frames and then you place them inside an extractor. And then you extract that honey. It sort of spins out the honey out of the comb. And then you put a mesh or a sift at the bottom of the extractor where it will separate the wax particles from the honey. And then you let that honey rest. What that process does, it allows the honey to actually take out all the bubbles, air bubbles to the top, and then any sediment that would be left in the honey, maybe, I don't know, pieces of soil or whatever, to the bottom. And then you give that about 24 hours, and then you package it. You literally open a valve, and where the honey will come out and get into the bottle. Depending how big you are, that process can be automated or done by hand manually. We are still doing it by hand. So each and every single bottle that you get from Native Nosi is bottled by hand. We open and close that lever. And then you then actually have it ready for the market. But also depending on how big you are. So up until this year, we were not using any food safety regulations, formal ones. But now that we've opened a shop where we actually offer a retail interface, and also we are getting clients that are providing honey to the formal market, we are now having to formalize. So part of that is a basic food safety certificate. That would be a certificate of acceptability that you have to get from your municipality. They will then come to your premises, look at your process, look at the type of equipment that you are using to process your honey, look at your hygiene, how you are affecting your hygiene. Do you have places to wash your hands? Are your people wearing head scrubs? Do you wear aprons? Are you having gloves on? Are there detergents to wash your hands? Are those detergents food safety detergents? How do you wash your equipment that you bottle with? So from a food safety perspective, that would be the that you would actually need. And then depending on the industry that you are actually supplying to, you may need HACCP food certification, you may need halal food certification, depending on who you are actually providing your food to. And they will also then have their own requirements that you would then need to adhere to. And they're extremely stringent, and but they do it to protect the consumers, obviously. So don't look at it as a limitation. I used to look at it as a limitation, like, how is a Black girl supposed to thrive with all these limitations in place? But I realized that when you have those things, it becomes easier for you to actually get your honey in any market within the confines of the country. And then from a labeling perspective, the Department of Agriculture has a labeling requirement which dictates what kind of information needs to be on your packaging, and also how should it be displayed. So the text size, the gram of or the mass of your product, where your product is actually packaged from, you know, so that people can be able to get hold of you, and all of that kind of information, the name of your company, the visibility of it, and all of that. Is it raw? Is it irradiated? Is it not irradiated? All that information needs to be declared on your product so that it can be compliant to the labeling standards of the South African Department of Agriculture. And this is also done to inform the consumer, because you want to know if this is raw honey, if this is not raw honey, the country of origin, is it a South African product? If not, where is it from? Is it only from there, or is it from there but it's labeled in South Africa? Is it from there and also labeled there or packaged there? So it's really just to inform the consumer so that they can be able to make informed decision when they get the product. And those are some of the legislation that you actually have to observe when you are packaging your product or when you are processing your product.
Wow. And here we thought, you know, eating honey is just straight from the bees. You're selling it through to us, and that's that. But there's so many things that are involved throughout that process for that product to be sold through to a consumer. I read some, I think recently, I think it was a few weeks ago, where you posted on your social media and were pretty much thanking everybody that has supported Native Nosi over the years, simply because, you know, there've been a lot of highs and very low lows in your business. And so take us through the challenges that you've experienced in the past 5 years of having to run Native Nosi.
Oh, so the challenge, I don't even want to get into them because there are so many. But I think people have really embraced Native Nosi because it really is one of a kind. You don't get a lot of people of my demographic or profile who actually get into bee farming. So I think one which can be a challenge but also an advantage is the fact that I had no script. I have no one to refer to. Everyone that I refer to does not have the same experience that I have. You know, they are normally Caucasian, they are normally male, they are normally middle-aged, or, you know, in the older generation. They normally have farms or resources, and even if they don't have a farm, they have resources to get a farm. So I think some of those challenges have been, you know, talking about beekeeping to people who do not face the same limitations that I do. So I had to literally write my own script, decide how I want to do beekeeping, and with the limitations, how am I going to find a way to actually get to where I need to get to. One of them being farming without a farm. I mean, that has its own challenges, you know. You'd find that even though a crop farmer is, you know, willing to have us on their farms, they will probably have like some spraying programs that they have to undertake. And with bees being there and us not, you know, owning the land, they will tell us that, look, in a week we are spraying, come and remove your bees. And that is a logistical and very expensive project to undertake, because now you have to find another location for your beehives. You have to now organize resources, hire trucks and things like that to take them from point A to B. Your labor costs go high. So just trying to farm smart given the limitations that we have. And obviously, as I've spoken about the red tape, all the regulations that we have to adhere to actually do what we do. Before we opened the shop, we opened our first shop in July. We knew that we had to do these things, but because we were not doing it formally, we were not selling to the formal market, we were literally selling from our online store. Households who wanted to buy, so say it's you, Mbali, you want to buy, you are in the East Rand, you simply log on to our website, you choose the products that you want, fill in your details and your delivery address, and then we package from our home and send it to you. So there was no actual red tape that we had to observe for us to actually do it. We were just from our corner, obviously practicing hygiene to make sure that, you know, our product had integrity and it did not harm any lives that actually consumed it, because obviously we are not trying to do anything that may implicate our product in a bad way. So we did, you know, do our part in terms of practicing safe hygiene for us to actually package, but we were not doing it with a gun against our head, that if you don't do this, then you can't trade. Now that we have the premises, we have to get all of these things, and they're not cheap. You'll find that you can only have stainless steel in your kitchen. You know, you need to have 2 basins, you need to have changing rooms and have like all this protective gear, PPE that people have to actually use. You know, your environment must not have certain noise levels. Your things must, you know, so there's so much. Your paint must be a certain paint. It can't be a matte paint which absorbs dust. It has to be an oil-based paint that you have to paint. And by that time, you've already painted your store. You are still paying of like all the capital cost that you had to undertake to actually start your place. So that is really, really tedious, and it's expensive, you know, because you don't have that budget, like it's literally like hand to mouth. So that also came with its own limitations.
Challenges.
And also then, yeah, just people then, you know, not so sure, black lady beekeeping, like, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Is this product even legit? Like, where did you say you do your honey? Do you understand? So you having to actually convince those people who are not so convinced that a black girl can actually show up and do this thing. That also comes with its limitations. So constantly trying to prove yourself to people that, look, this product is superior. Yes, I did it. And yes, I can put my head on the block for it and stuff. So just, you know, convincing the market that you are actually legit and you actually know what you're doing and that your product can actually be trusted is another limitation. So I think just being a pioneer in a space that has not, you know, been dominated by people like yourself has had its own challenges in terms of me entering into the space.
Wow. So for everybody that's listening, where can we find Native Nosi's products?
So we currently opened our own store, which is in Greenland Village Center. It's the Native Nosi Honey Emporium in Greenland Village Center in Menlo Park, Pretoria. You can definitely get it there. We not only sell bee products or honey products, we also sell other African indigenous products that complement our honey, that's also made by other young female Black entrepreneurs that have equal quality and integrity as the Native Nosi product has been known for.
Wow.
We also have stockists. We've got La Marina Foods in Modderfontein, Johannesburg. And we also have in Brooklyn, Pretoria, Pure Living, that sell health goods, and our honey is also hosted by them. And Press for Coffee in Fairy Glen, Pretoria, who sell coffee products and bread. And then they also have a nice deli, which our honey makes part of the deli. We also in Cape Town have Wheeler's Pharmacy, They also have a nice deli. They sell the most amazing product. And what I love about them is that they also support a lot of local brands. So you can get our honey from them. They are in Hout Bay. It's called Wheeler's Pharmacy. And lastly, Pajamas and Jam, which is in Strand, in Pretoria, in Cape Town. They also have a beautiful deli, which also sells our honey. We also are looking to partner with pharmacies, delis, fresh food stores that actually embrace the kind of product that we sell, because we do not want to sell our honey in the mainstream market where people who are going there are not looking for artisan products. They are just, looking for what the market can offer. And normally they are the kind of consumers who will complain that, it has crystallized, or it's slightly more expensive, because raw honey is slightly more expensive than irradiated honey, which is basically imported honey with no nutritional value. That is what you will get on most commercial retail shelves. So if there are people, scattered all over South Africa who are looking to partner with us, they are more than welcome. And lastly, we sell from our online store. We've got a Native Nosi online store, which is nativenosi.co.za. You go to our website and say buy honey, and then it will give you all the products that we actually sell in our store, as well as our honey. You pick the products you like, you check out, enter your personal details, and we will deliver any product on our online store wherever you are in the country, because we deliver nationwide. So that's where you can get our products.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic, Mokgadi. And I know we're running out of time, but I really feel like we should have a next live, because there's another part of Native Nosi that you mentioned about pollination services, and I'm very interested in that as a farmer as well. And that also opens the eye to many other farmers in terms of how you can collaborate with other farmers that are typically not in your niche, that could benefit in terms of your farming production. So I hope we could have you once again next time. But just to sum up our conversation, what's next for Native Nosi?
Oh my God, there is so much happening in the pipeline. We are obviously looking into growing our pollination part of the business, which I am happy to have another engagement with you on that, because not only does it give us another service offering as Native Nosi, but what it does is that it also provides a revenue stream for Native Nosi. So we are looking at growing that and partnering with more crop farmers to grow that side of the business. And then we are also looking at, because now we've got a retail space, we are now doing a lot of beekeeping training, because a lot of people come to us, they want to know, how we got into the space. They want to start their own small little thing, whether it's for hobbyists or whether they want to do it at a commercial scale. And we were redirecting a lot of the stuff, and we realized, actually, we know all of this stuff. Why don't we actually just do it ourselves? So now we offer beekeeping training straight from our emporium, and then we use our Pretoria site to actually do the practicals. And then the last thing is corporate gifting and eventing, where we curate gifts around our honey products to actually, do impact gifting, where it's not just, getting something from a retail shop, putting it together in a gift basket, but it is a basket that celebrates what Native Nosi is about. And it also then empowers everybody who is involved in the Native Nosi value chain, but also because Native Nosi intentionally sources from like-minded entrepreneurs and farmers who are giving superior products and superior quality, and these are not products that you would find in the mainstream. So we are looking at sharing that from a gifting perspective and from an events perspective, where we give other entrepreneurs who have unique offerings to actually curate events around that, whether it's honey tasting, whether it's indigenous teas, whatever it is, that we can curate events around that and actually offer it to the markets to give them a different experience and to let them into our world through the gifting and the events.
Wow. That is interesting. I think I've learned something over and above everything that you actually said as well. Impact gifting. It's really about educating the consumer where the product comes from and the importance of supporting local, but not only supporting local, but there's a definitely added advantage in supporting local products and understanding what you're buying, how it is processed, who the partners who the partners are in creating this specific gift. Mokgadi, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really going to hold you on to that one, to have another one, another conversation, another podcast interview, because your product, your brand is so interesting. Definitely niche in the industry. And from my side, you are the only Black girl that I know that's in beekeeping. So I know that you are definitely doing the most in an industry that you didn't really have enough resources when you started. You were just trialing things, and look what it's become. So I definitely commend you for still being growing the Native Nosi brand for 5 years, over and above the challenges. But yeah, I think I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mbali, for having me. And yes, let's have the pollination one. I know that a lot of our farmers are in crop and livestock farming, and it would really be beneficial for all of us to see the touch points between the different types of farming that we do, because at the end of the day, we are all contributing towards food security, and we are all contributing towards job creation. And we need to really collaborate so that those aspects can come alive and benefit, the country as a whole.
From Native Nosi, which is a proudly South African honey brand. Please do check out their website with all the other products that they sell. They definitely do sell the brand, or the honey online, as well as the different stockists or location that she had mentioned. But I do believe that all of that information will be on the website. So as Mokgadi said, it's not about just buying products off the mainstream retail. It's about understanding how the product was made, why you're procuring it, and who else you're supporting along the value chain. So instead of just buying a product, let's just buy it with an intention, because we are creating an impact as consumers. And for anybody wanting to be an entrepreneur in this space, you could definitely learn so many lessons from Mokgadi's story. She went from just selling bees, taking bees from her father's production and selling it to consumers, because she could taste the difference between real honey versus processed honey with other products that are really not serve you as an individual in terms of nutritional value. And then she created this brand. So if you're watching and you're thinking of what type of business to start, you could definitely be a value adder into the agricultural supply chain, especially if you're interested in farming. It's not only about being on a primary level, but there's so many opportunities around the agricultural value chain that we can all leverage off. So I really hope that we could have Mokgadi soon again to have a different conversation around her other service that she offers or partners with farmers. But that's it from me today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mbali, for having me.